I kind of want to, as we get started tonight, and I'm sure some others might join us in a little bit, I'd like to facilitate some conversation. I don't know how many of you saw what I placed on Facebook, but I think it kind of gets at my response to everything that's happened recently in the news, and not only recently, but I mean, you could take me back to 9/11. I remember 9/11 and the events of that day, and even the aftermath. But our country and our nation has just faced so many difficulties, and we've seen so many tragedies from Las Vegas all the way, we go back from Columbine and even to what's just happened in Florida. But I think there's a greater issue and a greater problem than many of us want to really look at. And I'm just going to kind of read this, what I wrote, and then I just want us to talk a little bit before we pray, because I know ultimately our hope is in Christ as Christians. What we believe is that only God can change, as Christians, the human heart, and God can transform the soul. And so there's amazing power in Him when we turn to Him for help. So here's what I wrote. I'm certain that many of us would agree that our lives and the lives of our loved ones, family and friends, have been adversely affected by drugs and addiction, family strife, teen suicide, and numerous other debilitating and harmful issues that are stripping the future away for our families and our children and communities. Our country has seen and experienced many painful losses and tragedies related and born from these same issues. And our country is full of strife and division and focused on differences. And there is no true unifying voice or motive to be heard, and I'll just say it, there is no unifying vision to be had, to be seen. In response to our current reality, we have heard clamors for new laws, for money to research and fund organizations and institutions to lead change for the better. And as good as those things may sound, I don't believe they'll solve the problems that we and our families and our children and our communities are facing day to day. I believe the real driving force for change must begin with us. And the change must be made from the inside out, and the term I use is from grassroots for our future. We cannot look solely to our politicians, to laws, to our local and federal law organizations. And the reason I believe this is because I believe the problem is far worse and the burden far greater than they themselves can carry. I think we place too much expectation on them, and we demand for them to change. But unfortunately, as hard as they may try, unless we change, they will just be spinning their wheels. So here's what I believe. We must carry that burden with them, and we must not unite behind their efforts, but they must unite and be empowered to support our efforts from the inside out. We as parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, teachers, friends, and community leaders have to take up the banner of hope, the banner of change, and we must lead by the way of example. And I think we need to free ourselves from the hypocrisy and the narrow visioning of the past. And hypocrisy is we want change, but we're not willing to change. And that's the hypocrisy. We want to scream and cry and throw temper tantrums, but who amongst us has been willing to step out and really to try to make a difference? And it's not just enough for one or two or even a handful. I think it has to be a community effort. I made a statement a few weeks ago, and I think some of you might remember it, and that statement was this: if your life is miserable, no matter what the circumstances are, then you're not living it well. And if you think about that, that is just the absolute truth. We have the wisdom of the ages at our fingertips. We have research and information that can go beyond at any point in time in history. We have enough studies. We have enough information. Listen, we have enough ears, I think, even that have listened and heard all these things. And And I think we have the wisdom of our youth because, they spoke up today and yesterday. They described their fears of living in this country, their fears of going to school, their struggles with life. I mean, our culture is one of the most stressful cultures that exist on the face of the planet. We have added so much and made life so much about everything else than what's really important. And life is chaotic and life is crazy, and I'm not quite sure that they even know what life is all about. What's most important in life. I can tell you right now, I'm going off on a tangent here, but as a hospice pastor, when I sit beside these loved ones dying, and I listen to what they say and what's most important to them at that moment when they're going to take their last breath, my first thought is, why didn't you deal with this long ago? Why did you wait till you're dying to deal with this? And that's, I think, is human nature. We want to avoid the problem. We want to overlook it. We don't want to deal with it. It's too much stress. It's more stress. We can barely keep our own heads above water. So why would we take this much more burden upon ourselves? But to listen to these kids and say, what's hurting you? What's breaking your heart? Why are you struggling? What makes life hard? And to be able to speak into that. They're searching for relief, and they search for it in all kinds of things, from drugs to sex to relationships. I mean, they are searching. And I think the voices that need to be heard aren't being heard, and the voices that shouldn't be heard are loud in our face. We have history to look back to. We have wisdom that we can go to. We have the knowledge. But what we don't have is the hearts of the people. We don't have a community ready to engage. Maybe down in Florida now, they're getting ready to engage. But, Julie, I think what spurred you on was the fact that the threat came. You have children in school, and the threat came, and you are saying to yourself, are we going to wait till it hits our home? Are we going to wait till it hits us in our hearts? Are we going to wait till our children are taken? And that's the question. When are we going to move together for change? I'm going to be honest. God isn't enough for some people. Jesus wasn't enough. Jesus isn't enough because if he was, we would be doing something as Christians. Politics isn't enough. I mean, politics is very good at getting some people motivated, but I think for the most part it does a lot to divide people, to make life harder, to make life about more things than it really should be. So I have no faith in the church. I have no faith in the government. I have no faith really in much. But I hold out for that hope. That hope that our community might be able to do something together. That we can get rid of our differences and our walls that divide, our ideologies. We can slide them under the rug and say they don't matter because they're like the dirt that we track underneath our feet. What is really life all about? What is most important? Why are we even here? The idea is that I think it's time for us to offer our children, but most importantly, I think our parents, foundations for living well. Because if it's not being lived well in the home, if it doesn't start with the parents, if it doesn't start well in the home, with the parents teaching their children, guiding their children, loving their children, shaping their children, we may be spinning our wheels, even if we did get together and try to make change. What can we do to change parents' lives? How can we return, as they said in the Old Testament, prophet said, how can we get the fathers to turn their hearts back to their children? It's time for us, I think, to try to offer foundations for living well, positive perceptions, to think about what life is about, to process the ways that they feel, because we know teenagers are full of emotions and everything works to move their emotions, to help them positively process their relationships with others, and also how they should feel and think about their own selves and their own persons. Because that's where a lot of chaos in our culture strives. I mean, that's where it comes from. Who are you? No, you're this, or you're that, or you're this. Why can't you just be a human being that is loved? Why do you have to own an identity? Why do you have to base who you are on an ideology? You're a human being and you're alive, and you have life. How can we help you live that life to the fullest? And that's what it should be about. We need to give them tools to help them cope with the difficulties they'll face in life. And trust me, we know life is full of difficulties. We need to give them a strong character so that they can stand strong in the storms that will come, because we know that life is full of storms. And we need to give them a community support system that they can turn to that will help make it all possible. Where in our community can they turn to find that support system that'll gird them up, move them forward, move them on, that'll teach them about life, what's really important? I think by doing this, we'll put them in a place to help them overcome when the odds are stacked against them, but I think also what we'll do is we'll help them prosper when the winds are in their favor. To live with purpose and meaning, and to live with a future, the hope of a future where they don't have to be afraid. I lived in the inner city for a long time, and every day I lived in fear. That's not an existence. That's not a good existence. We shouldn't have to live in fear, not in this nation, not in this country. I think we really need to examine our culture. I think we need to examine our communities, and I think we need to examine ourselves individually. And we have to weed out, let's face it, we have to weed out, beginning with us, the things that drain, degrade, deter, siphon, and sabotage any fresh breath that we might have concerning our future. We got to get rid of it, cast off that which easily entangles us and keeps us from living life. And for the sake of our community, for the sake of all its citizens, from the youngest to the oldest, when are we going to act, or will we wait till we're dying and we're dead, close to death, before we wake up and say, now's the time to change? While it's still today. We can't leave the shaping of our families and our children in the hands of the entertainment industry. We can't leave the upbringing of our children to this failed approach of just give them more information, and somehow that information is going to make them live good lives. That has not worked. It has not worked. We have some of the smartest, most intelligent children that have ever existed, and they have a lot of information, but they don't know how to use it. They don't have wisdom. They don't have common sense, some of them. It's not that they're dumb, just they've never been taught what's really important. I think we need to rise up like giants. And we need to take a look at how our culture and our society approaches life and understands life. And see how it is robbing us and our country of the future hope and peace that it could have, the future hope and peace for our children and our children's children. The future does not look good. But here's the thing I'm so sick of. No more words. This is something we have talked about for decades. This is something politicians have fought over for decades. This is something different groups have clamored about and yelled about and fought about, and what good has it done? It's time to do something. And it doesn't involve hating other people. It doesn't involve fighting. It doesn't involve me overcoming you and you overcoming me. You know what it involves? Us learning how to live life to the fullest. Learning how to live life, enjoy life. Getting rid of the stupid stuff. And finding our way through this mess that we've been left and that's been handed down to us from those who've gone on before us. Not intentionally, not for some. No more wasting time. It's time to redeem it. Right? It's time to redeem the time we have left. And I'm going to say it, and I said it before. Listen, in the words of William Bradford, concerning the bravery and sacrifice of the Pilgrims, we have an example to work from. Last and not least, they cherished a great hope and inward zeal of laying a good foundation, or at least of making some way towards it, for the propagation and advance of the gospel of the kingdom of Christ in the remote parts of the world, even though they should be but stepping stones to others in the performance of so great a work. To take the steps for change, even if we be but stepping stones. It's going to take brave and resilient people who will take the steps to lay that good foundation. To look at the insurmountable issues that we face and to say, especially as Christians, in the name of the Lord, here go I. We need to grab the hand of somebody today, and we have to commit to the good work of making our communities the place that we always dreamed they could be, without the material fluff, without the social and political confusions of our day, without the aims of men and what they have strove after for the past, since the beginning of time. And as for me and my house, with the help of God who breathes life into me, we will serve the Lord for such a purpose. And isn't it His purpose? I came so they might have life, and life in abundance. I came to set the prisoner free. I came for the burdened and the broken and the lost. And that's really why we're here, isn't it?